So I have some Game Master wisdom for you about player participation. You know, the old school is guilty of something. A lot of Game Masters back in the day didn't care about player participation beyond the basics of playing their character in the game. That was it. The Game Master calls all the other shots. Now, this is not true for every old school Game Master, but were there quite a few that really looked at the idea of player participation as a waste of time, yet we still had a fringe movement that really believed in it, and you got some ideas that came from player participation, even back in the day, but it was something that just never took with the majority. I have to actually be real with you. Most players didn't really care for going beyond making their character and playing their character. So, in reality, even though it wasn't something a lot of Game Masters back in the day were offering, there weren't a lot of players asking for it either. I gotta be real with you, right? So it wasn't a big issue. But you know what? It's something that by the time the mid-90s hit, I started really looking at, because I'm trying to improve in every way that I can as a Game Master. And I decided, especially in the mid-90s, to just start being dead honest. I had been Game Mastering at that point from 1991 till 1995. And I just decided to open myself up and say, let's get rid of my ego. Let's see the reality of what's going on. And let's see where I can improve and get better. And is this idea of player participation beyond playing the character and making the character, is this a worthwhile thing? And so I did explore it, and I explored it for quite a few years, to the point where I think I understand it, and I've used it since. But more like on and off, and I'll explain all that as we go further. Further, as we go further in the fucking video. Yeah. Okay. So, player participation. Here's what you learn. There's a lot of gaming ideas out there that have major player participation. Right? And there's many that are popular today. You'll hear about players making their gods and shit like this. Now, what I've learned over the years is player participation is a good thing. So let's clear the air on that. This is not something I'm criticizing. Player participation beyond just playing the character is a good thing for the game. Yep. Now, we got to get into the details here, because as they say, the devil is in the fucking details, and that's where you're going to find it in this, in my opinion anyway. So here it is. What I learned was a minor amount of player participation is enough. So, do players enjoy participating beyond their character stuff? They actually do. Even the majority do. Even though the old school didn't seem to represent that in the player base, it was a different time with a different set of opinions, and the DMs really had sway and influence over the opinions of people in the hobby, right? So if a lot of DMs were saying this was no good, a lot of players would go along with that. What I discovered was this. Most players didn't like a lot of participation beyond the character. So it still remained true that there wasn't a lot of effort people wanted to put into it. So you'll get some fringe ideas, like you hear about, certain games where they're making gods. That's a real fringe thing. And I get why anybody would be addicted to it, because players do like the idea of player participation. The majority, that's too much for them. But that doesn't mean they should avoid player participation, because I actually think it's good for the game, and I actually think it's good for them. But I would do it in more minor ways, because what I find is, even for the players that really like it, and then the players that are sort of on the fence about it, I found a way that everyone's happy, because what I realized is all people are okay with just a bit. You don't need to go to the God thing. You can still do your work as a game master, and still find ways to let your players participate beyond just making the character. And there's all kinds of ways you discover, all kinds of ways you can bring in and make up. Here's a minor way that really worked for me. It's a minor thing, but genius, because it's allowing the player to really have sway in on their character in a way that's beyond just the player's handbook. I ran second edition AD&D back in the day, right? They had this, in Splash books, they had these options called kits. Now, kits were pretty simple things. Like, it's like you'd have a fighter's kit. So if you were playing a fighter class character from the player handbook, you could take this kit. It had a few things. You adapt it onto the character, and the character becomes that thing, right? Like, it could be like a rogue bounty hunter type of kit, you know what I mean? Like, it will have a number of skills and that. And for the most part, like, it gave you a few freebies in some of the kits. Mainly it would focus on, you know, the options you had in the during character creation from the player's handbook, and just saying, okay, when you go pick your skills, pick these, it will make you this guy. I was pretty lenient. I would make sure that, you know, I was pretty open-minded about this. But here's what I did with the kits. They were so easy to sort of come up with your own idea or even use something and make an adjustment that I told players exactly that. Here's what a kit is. You can either make your own for your character. I don't care what it is. Or you can take one of these, or, you know what I mean? Or you can even adjust one of these and adapt it to your character. And by doing that, by letting players make their own kits for the character class, it meant they could really direct the gameplay, say what their character was beyond a fighter, and make that a focused goal of the game, because they can actually play to this. So if they wanted to play a fighter who was a carpenter, okay. You know, if the skill options were lacking, but one more was needed to really make that kit work, oh yeah, I give it to you. No problem. And this was a way of letting players really participate in the game and the setting beyond just the basic character choice in the game. That's a minor way, but players loved it. The players that didn't want to do much, that was pretty creative for them, right? You didn't have to write up much. You didn't have to do much. Pretty common sense if you wanted it to be. And for the players that really, really liked getting in the details, they seen the kits and realized they could do just magic with them. Like, just write up big kits. And they did. They did. And so what I found was, I found a way of bringing in people that were semi on the fence about it, liked it, but not too much work, and people that really liked the grind, having an option to grind, right? And that's a more minor way, because what it does is it allows me to still do my job with the setting and adapt my ideas, right? And another thing you learn as a game master in the process, and I said this before, is players are selfish. So that's another reason player participation, having some say in the game in this way, is another attractive thing, right? And as I suggest to any game master, once you let players get the high off participation, if you really want to make your players happy, make the game about them. And I really mean that. Like, don't make it about your villain. Like, it's the villain is there, or the whatever is there, or the setting is there. But the setting is background to the main characters. And so you can communicate it, but you can't have the setting outshine the player characters. Or if it is to outshine in any way or have its moment where the characters are sort of background, it's for the sake of enhancing the story for the characters. Like, it's always something focused towards bettering the situation towards the characters, either by focusing on them or whatever's happening is something to enhance what's going on with them. It's always a focus on them. You'll play to the selfishness of your players, and this is just the truth. They will enjoy it. And like 99% of players in this hobby are very selfish. It's the kind of people the hobby draws to it. Once you realize that, you don't hold that against them. So if you play to their selfishness, good on you. Another way to make sure players are participating is the most basic way, and it's one old school DMs. Here's what I would say to them. They frowned at backgrounds, but I said this for many years. It's obvious players keep pushing backgrounds towards us, or we wouldn't keep complaining, right? So it's something the customer base, the player base is saying they want this, and that background is their player participation. Understand, they get to say background, they get to say certain things that you might count as things down in the world, their brother, their father, their whatever. But this is their way of participating in the world beyond just making their character. And if you take that away from them, here's what I would warn old DMs, and I think it happened. If you keep stripping this away from them, people will find a way to bring this in either way. And you won't like the later options for how they do it. So if you don't get open to a backstory and allow your players to participate this way, no matter what you think of it, understand the reason it consistently happens, the reason you keep running into it is because it's something people want. And if you keep not serving it, somebody will come serve it, and they'll come serve it in a way that you don't want them to. It's like the way TSR went out of business, and TSR was only serving a minority of its customer base to appease it. It tried to serve the majority when it brought second edition out. During the time the company was already collapsing before second edition AD&D hit the market, it was trying to save the company with that game. Didn't work out. Now, after not serving the majority for most of its existence, that being TSR, what happened? WotC comes in and makes pretty much a crap game, but really, it just listened to what a lot of players were saying they wanted and put that stuff in the game. Made it easier, did all this stuff, and you're like, yeah, they're going to serve the majority, and they're going to do it in a terrible way. That's why, no matter what you think, I always say in this hobby, listening to people, the players and the customers is important. It's important to understand that, because if you don't listen to them because what you want to be true, you want to be true, but it's just not. If it doesn't line up with what you're encountering, it's not. But the problem with some nerds in this hobby is they decide what they want to be true rather than what is, and then they'll stick to that thing even as it fails. Nerds will go down with the ship. The problem is they're constantly going down with ships. I mean, that's nerds. It's like a sea of just wrecked ships gone down completely. At least in this tabletop role-playing game hobby, because every one of them seems to latch onto ideas that are at least the loudest ones, at least the hardest ones, seem to latch onto things that is fringe or minority. And with that crowd, they'll drag down the entire hobby to get it their own way. And these nerds exist as the designers and the people that are the customers. It's a fucked up little nerd world we have here in the tabletop role-playing game hobby. To them, I sometimes think it's like, if we can't have it our way, nobody will have it. It's like they're willing to burn the entire system down to have things their way, even when it's so obvious. Like, man, we need a market to produce all these products. Yeah. The market needs the majority of customers. Yeah. The majority of customers completely oppose your way and want this other thing that you don't like. Well, I don't want that thing to exist. But if it exists, at least we have the majority. And then a market exists with companies with money where they could possibly make your products. I don't care. And that's the nerd right there. Instead of accepting the idea of bringing the majority in and being a bit peaceful to that because it might produce what they want, nerds in this hobby will burn that. So if they can prevent the majority coming in because they don't want a certain product to exist, even if it's going to destroy them, they'll do it. Rather than just letting it happen for the sake of this other thing working out. It can get cult-like in the hobby. And a lot of groups in the hobby are like this. They're cult-like. It's like if you do something that they oppose, it can get really crazy. And you can see it in these stiffy attitudes about like not allowing players to participate or backgrounds. And some of that still goes on today. Some of that still carries over. I met some newer DMs that are strict, right? And I think they've even sort of been being taught by some old school guys, right? So they'll say no to certain things, or you can only have this much of a background. It's just like, look, if you don't do these things and let players participate, they'll find other ways, and it gets extreme, and it can blow up the game or ruin the experience or create a fringe that doesn't need to exist. The minor participating through the background story, or even through like a kit scheme like I had going on, that's a more effective way of player participation happening. And guess what? It fills the need. So you don't need all this other stuff if you have that. That would be my point. I'm not saying you can't do what you want. Go ahead, let them make gods. But if your aim ever as a game master is to go, I want to make my players happy by creating some player participation, I just want you to know that the minor ways of allowing players to participate works. And to be honest, most players are lazy. So the easier it is, but it allows them to do some cool stuff, the more they'll be into it. So if you're someone out there that doesn't allow backstories, maybe start. Especially if you still got people coming to you about them. Maybe start allowing that. Be more open-minded, because by allowing that, you don't really produce the extremes later. But that's, I think, what happened in the hobby. The reason we got so many of these extreme, strange player participating ideas on the fringe that exist, I think they only exist because that is something players were looking for and they were denied it. But how sad is it when you really think about it, how easy it is to feed the need through a simple backstory, even if it were a page or two. I mean, isn't it better than all the other extreme crap that comes later that doesn't work in the fringe? That didn't help really the hobby? It creates a small cult group, and they always seem to be negative towards everyone. And this is not, it's true with the current group that does it today, and it's true with previous groups. They become strange in their cult-like nerdiness, right? Anyway, there is some game master wisdom, with all kinds of little extras thrown in there. It doesn't take much, but player participation is good. It's something you should do if you're a game master. Make sure your players can participate a little more, but make sure it's not much more. Just find that balance and you'll please your players. And then you can get the players that are a bit way more lazier, but a bit on the fence, and you can get the other guys that want to. And in both cases, like, look, here's what you do. You let the fence player make his paragraph background, because he still wants to make a background, but he's probably going to be way more simple about it. Let the guy who wants to do 2 pages do 2 pages. But you just got to warn them every time, right? And read it. Fucking read it. Like, if you only want to read a page, tell them a page. But I at least give creatives a page. So if I get a creative player that comes in wanting to do this, and I've always said this, you'll hear it in other videos, I let you give me 1 page. That's quite a bit of text to get down for a backstory, right? So for the more creatives, I find they will use the page up when I give them that page thing. For the more casual guys that still want some cool ideas put into their backstory, they like the fact that even though they won't want to write a page out, it's still there to write out some cool things. Like just some ideas they can write in, and then they know me. My players will know me, or the people that are joining the game, they get to know this really quick. I will use the backstories, right? So it's not just that you make them to be cool. I use them, and that's how you're really participating, because then your backstory really is played into the campaign. Because my games are all about the characters. It's not about my setting. It's not about my NPCs. It's not about the monster. It's not about the big treasure. It's not about the villain. My games are always focused on the player characters. Like, the whole thing is designed for them. I don't design anything for them to, they got to figure out their way through this. It's not like, no, it's like, this has to figure out how to surround them. Right? Because, it's more about them than it is about anything. And I got to tell anybody, it just works. That's a consistent way to run the game as a game master, because you're feeding the selfishness. Okay, player participation, important, easy, don't do too much. Don't go to the extremes. Do the basics, backstory. The kit idea I told you about, you could use kits for AD&D 1, D&D. You could even get away with some idea like that in some of the newer games. And there's even some side non-D&D games that the idea of the kits could be applied so players could do more and not destroy the game or do it game breaking. So look into options. No matter what you run, how can players participate just a bit more beyond character creation, not too much more, and to a degree where they're not really taking up your job, right? Like them doing a backstory is still you adapt their stuff where you want, right? It's still you maintain control of how that stuff goes. To me, when you get up to the point of player participation where they made something, they have control over it, like it's too much game breaking shit. And there's an attachment, I think a passion that comes with game mastering. That if you don't want to get burnt out on game mastering, there has to be a bit of like, that's yours, that's your thing. It's like, that's their characters, this is your world, right? It's like you need your thing. And I don't mind bringing your ideas into what I call my world, but that's the way I'll perceive it, right? Because I still want to make sure, even though it's not about the setting, the setting is going to be cool, and the setting is going to be what I want it to be, so I can manage the setting and understand it and not be confused by it myself by allowing people to tweak with it in the wrong way. By letting you do a fucking backstory, I can adjust the setting to some of your ideas, but it's still under my control, my management, and that's my job at the end of the day, is to make sure all that works, right? So I don't want to control that because I think I'm God. I want to control that because I want to make sure you have a great session. And the more I feel like I'm in control of this thing, just like you are your character, the more confident I am as a game master. There's so many things that go along with really having your foot, on the gas, right? Like there's a confidence that comes with it, and you get into the flow as a game master. That's your flow, is when you're really in your thing. You're playing your character, the world. You're reacting to the other characters with the world, right? Just got to remember the setting is the game master's character. And that's where the game master's agency is. I believe in player agency, but there is game master agency. And in my opinion, when player participation leads to the players having authority over the setting, that's them crossing game master agency. That's it. And I think the respect can go both ways. If you want player agency to be respected, you got to be willing to say there is agency the game master has. Where is that line? Mystery until you accept that the line is at the setting. Okay, I love you, at least most of you. For now, take care.